the Director of Student Conduct.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sarahi, for coming out and doing this interview. And so can you go ahead and tell us how you came to start working at Southeastern University?
Yeah. It's a very long story. But long story short, what ended up happening was I was an RA here, and I stayed in relationship with Ray Allen and his family as I graduated and moved on. And in that, one day he was talking about how he was working for the discipline office, and I was like, well, I'm trying to go back to school, possibly to get my master's. And he's like, well, I think I have a graduate assistant position open. Would you be interested if it opens up? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I started being a graduate assistant for him for the department 6 years ago, and kind of worked my way up the ladder. And when he moved on to do multicultural affairs, I ended up being the director. So that's how I ended up back at Southeastern.
Okay, awesome. So how did you come to Southeastern as a student? Let's go back
that's even a longer story. But so Southeastern was never on my radar.
Okay.
I grew up wanting to be a Gator from a little town near Gainesville. And that was my life, envisioned. And but my sister went to school at Florida Southern, so I knew about Lakeland. Mm-hmm. And then she actually transferred from Florida Southern to Southeastern because she wanted to get a minor in youth ministry. Mm-hmm. And as she transitioned over, I would come visit her. One time we were here, and I went to chapel with her, and our old president, Dr. Rutland, was speaking. And he was talking about, he preached a sermon about how some of us knew that we were called into ministry, but we were just going to kind of pursue our own dreams and our own passions. However, we would end up being in our mid-30s and realizing that, well, we wasted a lot of money and a lot of time not pursuing the calling that the Lord has for our lives. And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, God, that's going to be me. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll go to school for ministry. I knew that I was called to the local church and to people in a different way. However, I was a really good arguer. Like, I love to argue and a point, and so that's why I wanted to be a lawyer. However, I reluctantly came. The first year, I was just upset with the fact that I was not doing what I, quote-unquote, love to do. There was a lot of pain and hurt from church situations that during that time, my dad's church was going through a church split. And so I was here, but I wasn't really here. But eventually, as the Lord started working with me and as I allowed myself to open up to people and be mentored, and I started healing some of that stuff. And then I finished here. I went from a psychology major to finally surrendering and graduating with my church ministries degree, and loved it ever since. Southeastern now is a big part of my life. This is where I met my husband. And now my kids love this place. So.
Wow, it's beautiful. And so before the interview, and even just now, you mentioned that you're a PK. And so can you go ahead and describe your experience of growing up in the church, and what was that like? And were you always a Christian from a young age, or did that come later on as a teenager?
So I grew up as a PK. I also kind of say I'm a missionary kid. I grew up in Ecuador, born and raised, and came here when I was about 9. My parents came here to the States to start a church for the Latino community in a very small kind of farmer town. So growing up in Ecuador was awesome. I had a lot of family, I had a lot of community. And then we moved here to America, and I didn't know a word of English. And had no family around. And so my entire concept of community completely changed in my head from my dad is one of 6. And so having uncles and aunts and cousins always around, to having these people that were church family, and that dynamic of family even changed there. So growing up as a PK, it was awesome and painful all in one. I always had people over at my house. I served in all ministries, even back in the days when there was like the transparencies and the projector and kind of moving that. I've done it all. I am a professional church attender. But in all that, I did realize, like, I gave the Lord my life when I was younger, and I served Him a lot through middle school and high school. But I don't know that I would say that I became an actual Christian until probably my last couple of years of college. When I came to college and I started figuring out this faith thing for me, I would have these, like, I would almost call them mental breakdowns, because I'm like, wait a minute, that's not what the flannel board told me. The flannel board told me that Jonah got swallowed by a whale, and it's not a whale in the Bible. And I had never read the stories for myself. You know, it's just a big fish. And Adam and Eve, and she didn't eat an apple. What do you mean? It could have been an orange. Like, and it was just like, if church had taught me these things and they suddenly weren't what the Bible said, then what else was fake and what else was not? You know, what else was made up and fabricated? And so I took that, and one of my professors told me to take that and allow it to not just keep me in anger, but to be the catalyst to help me dig out God and who He was for myself. And so I actually started reading my Bible and figuring out what that looked like for me. And I knew that God was always good, and I knew that through circumstances, God had always been my provider. So I knew the character of God, but as far as like who He was to me, I was, so about my senior year, I actually like started liking people, like not just because like they were creations of God, but because like I actually gave them a chance to get to know them. I started liking church again, and just kind of living my life not so guarded, but more of like, okay, like everybody is going to fall short, and so I just need to figure out how to love them in their shortcomings, because I've been loved in my own shortcomings. So yeah, probably senior year of college was when I actually like my life shifted a little bit.
Gotcha. And so it actually kind of brings us to our next question, and you've already touched on it a bit with talking about Dr. Rutland and visiting your sister and even having the professor who helped you along. Are there any other major events or people that you can pinpoint and say, that really strengthened my faith?
Yeah. A few. Ray Allen is one of them, for sure. His steadiness and consistentness was definitely one of them. I was this angry child who did not want to be a part of the greater Southeastern community. His family lived on the backside of where we lived in Valencia, and every time when I would see him, it was the same smile, you know, and the same greeting and the same, like, just consistent, like, hey, how you doing? You doing good? And he would stop and, like, actually care. And for a long time, I just ignored him. I wouldn't even, like, I would kind of go like this and just be like, okay, weird. And then as I, like, saw how consistent he was, I'm like, okay, I'm going to give him an answer. Hi, I'm good. And I kept going. But him, and then eventually his wife, I would get to know through a situation where she didn't know who I was, but she reached out to me and kind of helped me walk through some trauma and some heartbreak. And their family kind of became, really, now they're my family. They're godparents to my children. I'm a godparent to one of theirs. And just kind of have been the aunt and uncle, the family that the Lord has given me here in Lakeland. So him, his wife, Dr. Hackett has always been a source of wisdom in my life. He did my premarital counseling. If I could take a class with him, I would always do so. And even after marriage, like, he's been a solid, consistent person who has always asked hard questions and has always been intentional with me. And then there's a lot of people from Christian Life Center. That's the church where I did my internship down in Fort Lauderdale. Actually, when I graduated, I worked at that church. But a lot of people, pastors who were on staff there. One of our conference speakers, Nadine Raphael, she was a good friend of mine, and just a lot of people down there were just helping me heal through some of the stuff. And a lot of them, I don't think they realized how impactful they were to my faith and why I am the person I am today, because they chose to sit down and ask and answer some of my hard questions and walk with me through a lot of issues that I had in my brain and questions and doubts. And then I think there's a lot of professors here. Dr. Fetke, Sarah Valerie, just people that as I look back, I'm like, I just, there are certain things that have happened in my life that I can pinpoint a human being to, wow, they really helped me get through this. So yeah, I think I could probably talk about these people forever.
All day.
Like if I start thinking through each and every single one, we'd be here for days. It literally took a village to get me to a place of healthy relationship and understanding how to love people well. But our Ds, oh my Lord, they're now really close friends of mine, Amy and Alan Galindez, Erica Hendricks and her husband, just people that I met through being in student leadership, completely shifted my mind and the way that I saw living like a living Christian and what that looked like. Carrie Leader, she was an R&D here for a couple of years. She taught me how to eat vegetables and how to live intentionally, which was not something that I would do very often in regards to taking care of my body. So yeah, a lot of people here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And so through their actions, you started to open up, you said, and develop a real love for people. And so with their actions and taking the faith on your own, as your own, what has convinced you though that Christianity is true? More than anything else.
More than anything else. We're going to go really deep right now. The day when I finally stopped questioning that the Lord was real, I was sitting in a doctor's office. This was about 4 years ago now, way past college at this point. I remember it about as clear as day, the day I started doubting that God was real, 100%. Sitting in a doctor's office, and I had just found out that I had miscarried my first child. And I was in shock and in tears, and I kind of started questioning, like, why me? And my husband were trying to process that information, and there wasn't a doctor in the room. And I just remember closing my eyes, and I was like, God, if it's real, I know that it hurts so much, but just give me a peace. And as soon as I said that, the doctor came in, he started talking to me, and there was this overwhelming sense of, I got you, and you're going to be okay. And I couldn't grasp everything that was happening. It was just, everything was happening so quickly, but I just knew that I was being held so tightly by something outside of me and my husband. And that entire process of healing and navigating what it is to lose your first child was probably what drew me the closest to the Lord. I had a lot of choice words with him. I had a lot of questions and doubts, and but in every moment I just remember little things that the Lord would do to remind me that he was close and he was near me, and that there was hope to be found in it. So actually, way past college was when I was like, okay, this is it. Like, the Lord is real, and there's no doubt in my mind that I am serving something that is living and interested in every single moment of my life. Not just the beautiful things and the serving things and the ministry things, but he's interested in me in the chaos. And so, yeah, it was in a very weird place, but that's when I knew. Yeah.
And so, to wrap up this interview, we ask every interviewee 2 questions. And the 2 questions are, what is one thing you would leave, or one thing you'd encourage all believers with? Yeah. And what is one piece of advice you give to all non-believers?
Okay, so one thing I would encourage all believers with is God is interested in us, and he's interested in all of us. I think as believers, and we grew up in the church, and we have to somehow, there's a teaching that we have to be polished when we come to God, but we don't. He is our Father. When I talk to him, and people make fun of me all the time, when I start my prayers, I start with Daddy. because it's become that like relationship. He is my daddy, and now being a mom and dad get to see the good, the bad, the ugly, and the emotions and the moments that don't have a tagline. And so to believers, like, you don't have to be polished to come to the Lord. He can take you just as you are, just where you are, with whatever struggles you have, whatever questions, whatever words, whatever anything, he's ready and willing and open, and there's nothing that surprises him. And if you really seek him, he's willing to show himself to you. And he doesn't always look like what the church teaches us that he does. He doesn't always just show up when you're doing your devotional. He shows up in the face of chaos. He shows up in the face of a homeless person. He shows up in the face of just a random person who you may be walking down the street by. And so just to recognize the burning bushes around them. Moses stopped when he saw the burning bush, and he recognized that there was something different that was happening there. And so for us as believers, I don't think we take the time to stop and recognize that there's supernatural things that are happening in people's lives that he's speaking through. And to non-believers, give us grace. We are broken people. Christian people are so broken. And so just find somebody that is at least trying to seek relationship with the Lord, but give the Christian family and the church as a whole grace. We've messed up so bad. We've missed the marks in a lot of places, but we're just about as human as everybody else. And there are a lot of us out here who are trying to break the mold that has been created and actually truly be like Jesus. And so, just give the church grace, give Christian people grace, and find good people who are going to walk with you through the good, the bad, and the ugly. We don't get anywhere alone. We always need somebody to come alongside of us and help us navigate the journey, whether it is college or whether it is engagement, later on marriage, kids. I feel like the Lord didn't just allow us to be like one age because we'd figure it out. But as every season of our lives, as we evolve into the next, we realize, I don't know how to do this. And if you can find somebody to help you know how to do this, whether that's your relationship with Christ or how to move up to the next season of life as a Christian, you'll be okay. And there's good people out there. You just have to be willing to be vulnerable and open and transparent with them. So, yeah, I think those are it.
All right. And actually, I want to do a bonus question real quick.
Okay.
To people striving to pursue ministry as a career, what is one piece of advice you'd give them above all else?
Guard your heart and remember your priorities. There are, I learned this from somebody, I can't remember who, but there are crystal balls. Like if life was you juggling everything, everybody tries to find the perfect balance on how do I balance ministry and my family and my marriage, and I see it as if I'm juggling and I have church and my family and my kids and my relationship with God and my job, there are crystal balls that can never fall, and then there are rubber balls that, I can always get a new job, I can always find a new ministry, but I should never drop God, my husband, and my kids. And in all that, as I take care of that, the Lord will take care of my job and my ministry and everything else in between. So not necessarily kind of trying to find the balance, but just taking care of the important priorities. And the Lord is faithful to provide for the rest.
Wow. Thank you. I've never heard it put like that. So this concludes our interview. So just thank you again for doing this.
Of course. Thank you, guys.